This was a death that saved 2 million lives. A death that changed the course of history and prevented South Korea from getting its own nukes. A death that, to this day, remains unexplained. A mystery where we know the killer and we know how he did it, but we still can't explain what happened. This is the story behind the strange assassination of the South Korean president. On October 26, 1979, President Park Chung-hee was about to have his last meal. He just didn't know it. But at least one other person knew, and that person was someone very close to President Park. Someone who had gone to school with him and held a very powerful position during his regime. But he was not the only one with the president that day. President Park was accompanied by Cha Ji-chul, his chief bodyguard, Kim Gai-won, the chief secretary, and Kim Jae-gyu, who was the KCIA director. Also present were two young women, Sim Soo-bong, a rising singer who would entertain the guests, and Shin Jae-soon, a college student tasked with serving food and drink. Their presence wasn't peculiar because it was kind of a custom at the time to have young women around to sing and serve. What was actually peculiar was where the dinner was taking place, at a KCIA safe house. That's like your president having a meeting at a bunker. Why would the president even need to be at a safe house? Well, that's because he had made quite a few enemies. You see, like every other person consumed with power, Park used the Korean Central Agency, that's the KCIA, to suppress his political opponents. To reach these ends, the KCIA had used everything from wiretapping to arresting and torturing without court orders. The agency even made moves behind the scenes to improve President Park's political standing. KCIA agents would blackmail and threaten opposing lawmakers to bend them to the president's will. In some cases, they would bribe politicians to strengthen Park. Of course, the Korean public wasn't cool with any of this, so why didn't they just remove him in a democratic election? Well, they tried, but Park tried harder. In 1971, Park spent 10% of the country's budget on his presidential campaign. At the same time, the KCIA was working overtime to undercut his opponents. The president expected to win by a huge margin, especially since he had promised that this would be his last term in office. The results shocked Park, who nearly lost the election to Kim Dae-jung, who was emerging as a clear favorite of the Korean public. President Park had won by a tiny margin, but he knew that he wouldn't be as lucky again, so he decided to create his own luck. Instead of appealing to more voters, he simply ensured that votes didn't matter as much. He established the Yushin Constitution, which would replace direct voting with an indirect voting system, aka delegates. See, the great thing about delegates is that you can buy them off or threaten them into voting for you, even if the people choose them to vote for the other guy. But of course, such matters could be taken to the Supreme Court. That's why the Yushin Constitution gave the president the authority to appoint all judges. And it repealed presidential term limits and handed the president 1/3 of the National Assembly seats. President Park had ensured that he would remain the president until his death. Now he needed to make sure that his death didn't come too soon. That explains why he was at a top-secret location surrounded by bodyguards and military men. He was in a safe house. But he wasn't safe. And here's why. President Park had started using the military as his personal police. When people started opposing the Yushin Constitution, Park made it illegal to criticize it. Politicians, as well as members of the general public, could go to prison for up to 15 years for opposing or denying the Yushin Constitution. The ones enforcing all of this were military men who were seen as the bad guys, and now even those who supported him were having issues with this new constitution, so higher-ups in the military and the KCIA grew resentful of the president, who was overstaying his welcome. Flash forward a couple of years and you have the president, his bodyguard and chief secretary, alongside the head of his intelligence agency at a safe house to discuss something important. The subject of discussion was the protests that kept breaking out despite Park's draconian laws. Differing opinions emerged, ranging from maybe we should do something to win over the angry protesters to why don't we just kill a few million people and call it a day? President Park, to no one's surprise, leaned towards the more extreme view. His bodyguard, Cha Ji-chul, was even more extreme. He references the killing fields in Cambodia to note that they could always mass murder the protesters. Park agreed, saying that if the situation got worse, he would give direct orders to open fire at the protesters. KCIA Director Jae Gyu asked for moderate measures like, not killing protesters and instead listening to some of their demands. Park wasn't happy with his intelligence head being so soft. But perhaps even more unhappy was the president's bodyguard, who had his own beef with the spy master. Bodyguard Cha got his position after the president's wife was assassinated by a North Korean sympathizer. Since then, Cha had one goal: to protect the president. Fair enough. But the way he went about this goal angered the KCIA director, alongside pretty much everyone in the military. Bodyguard Cha had taken substantial troops from the army and placed them under his direct command. He had also appropriated tanks and helicopters from the army to include in the presidential security apparatus. In a way, he had launched his own parallel secret police. On top of that, he started taking over projects that would otherwise have been handled by the KCIA. And to add insult to injury, he kept belittling Director Jae Gyu and his KCIA every chance he got. Now, both of these men were in the same room, and one of them would pull a gun on the president by the end of the night, and the president wouldn't be the only one dying, as one of these men would end up killing the other. The feud between bodyguard Cha and director Jae Gyu went into overdrive in 1979, when the KCIA was tasked to interfere with the opposition party's internal election. The KCIA decided to support a softer candidate compared to the more aggressive Kim Young-sam. Bodyguard Cha launched his own operation to meddle with the election and ended up ruining the KCIA operation as well. The aggressive guy, Kim Young-sam, became the director of the opposing party. And even though this happened mainly because of bodyguard Cha's interference, he laid the entire blame on the KCIA. That's like someone kicking you out of the kitchen while you're baking a cake, then serving up a burnt monstrosity that doesn't even look like a cake and saying it was your doing. At this point, it should be obvious who was going to kill whom. The KCIA guy would pull the trigger and kill not just the bodyguard Cha, but also the president, who failed to rein him in. And the earliest hint of this came from how the KCIA director moved upon learning that the president had asked his agency to arrange a banquet that the president and his posse would attend. 15 minutes after Director Jae Gyu was notified of the banquet, he called the army chief, Jeong Seung-hwa, and the KCIA deputy director to a nearby building in the same compound. Arranging a meeting between his deputy and the army chief was suspicious. And it was even more suspicious that President Park and bodyguard Cha did not know anything about this. They were both scolding Director Jae Gyu without realizing that his deputy was hanging out with the chief of army staff in the next building. Also in the next building was Jae Gyu's semi-automatic Walther PPK pistol, which he went to get, after he'd had enough of the president and his bodyguard. While still discussing their issues at the KCIA safe house, Director Jae-gyu excused himself from the hall and went to the neighboring building where he briefly met the army chief and the deputy KCIA director. Then he went to his office, which was in the same building, and there he got his Walther PPK semi-automatic pistol and hid it in his pants. At the safe house, the young women had entered the banquet hall and were entertaining the guests. Sim Subong sang while Shin Jae-soon served food and drinks. The atmosphere was relaxed now. Outside, Director Jae-gyu was laying out the groundwork to assassinate President Park and Cha as well. And for that, he needed to get his most trusted men on board. Jae-gyu used to be a PE teacher at one point, and one of his students from back then, Park Seon-ho, was now a chief KCIA agent. He was Director Jae-gyu's most trusted subordinate, actually. Another man Jae-gyu trusted was his secretary, Hyung-ju. Director Jae-gyu shared his plan with his chief agent and his secretary, giving them 30 minutes to prepare. Jae-gyu told the two men that upon hearing gunshots, they should eliminate bodyguard Cha's men who were stationed outside. Then, Jae-gyu went to join President Park and bodyguard Cha in the banquet hall again. His co-conspirators went ahead and recruited 2 more men to their side. First was the head of security at the safe house, who was pretty close to Jae-gyu's student, Seon-ho. Disciple Seon-ho also got a KCIA driver on board. The driver was loyal to Seon-ho because Seon-ho's recommendation had made his career. So at this point, 5 men knew that Park and bodyguard Cha were going to die that night. The first was Director Jae-gyu himself. Then there were the men he got involved, his secretary and his former student, and finally, there were 2 men recruited by his student, the safe house's head of security and the KCIA driver. At the safe house, President Park was getting anxious, looking at the clock frequently. Jae-gyu had been gone a while, and given that bodyguard Cha and the president were literally on his home turf, was a little unsettling. Jae-gyu entered the hall once again and turned on the news for the president. But his demeanor was different. He kept looking at his watch. It's unclear whether the president noticed this, but at 38 minutes past 7, he asked Jae-gyu to turn off the TV, which he did. Outside, the guys recruited by Jae-gyu's student hid inside a car parked near the kitchen, and Jae-gyu's student went to the security guard's waiting room where he would take out key players if they didn't stand down. Everything was in place. It was go time. Director Jae-gyu, who had left the banquet hall once again after turning off the TV for President Park, went back in with his gun drawn. Shin Jae-soon was singing Lana et Rospo's I Love You. Jae-gyu told the chief secretary to take good care of His Excellency, then turned to the bodyguard Cha and shouted, "Insolent!" before firing at him. Bodyguard Cha was shot in the arm. Startled but protective of his security head, President Park shouted at Jae-gyu, "What are you doing?" Jae-gyu responded, "Hey, try dying too," and shot him in the chest twice. So, of the 4 men, 2 had been shot and 1 had done the shooting. That left behind Chief Secretary Kim, who had fled the hall while Director Jae-gyu was busy with bodyguard Cha and Park. Neither of them had died by that point, and Director Jae-gyu's pistol had jammed, so he went outside to get another gun. And just as he left, singer Sim Subong went outside as well. Bodyguard Cha also fled the banquet hall, bleeding on his hands. He made his way to a nearby bathroom while saying, "Why is he doing that?" Ironically, that question would remain unanswered for a long time. Jae-gyu returned with a Smith & Wesson Model 36 revolver that he'd taken from his student Seon-ho. In the hallway, he found bodyguard Cha, who had stumbled out of the bathroom to call for help. Jae-gyu shot Cha in the abdomen and left him to die. Then he went after his former classmate, the incapacitated president, and spoke to him before shooting him in the head. Outside, Jae-gyu's conspirators killed the president's guards, clearing the path for Jae-gyu to walk out without immediate repercussions. But repercussions were sure to follow. After killing Park, Director Jae-gyu turned to the last man standing, Chief Secretary Kim. But instead of shooting him, he told the man to secure the safe house. Then he ran to the building where the army chief was waiting. Everyone had heard the gunshots, so it was clear that something was going on. When Director Jae-gyu stumbled into the room with blood on his shirt, he had everyone's attention. He told them that there was an emergency. He got the KCIA agents to carry Park to the president's car, which immediately left for the hospital. There, the chief secretary begged the doctors to do everything they could to save the man's life, without revealing who the man was. At that point, only a handful of people knew that the president was dead. Even the army chief didn't seem to be in the loop. Director Jae-gyu and the army chief had left the KCIA compound in a secure vehicle. In the car, Director Jae-gyu informed the army chief that President Park had died. He didn't disclose who had killed him, he just indicated that the president had been shot. The army chief asked if he was dead. Jae-gyu said that he was positive that Park had passed away. Then, Jae-gyu made a strong case for martial law, saying that the situation would get out of hand on the border. Just as he was making his case, the army chief noticed that Jae-gyu wasn't wearing his shoes. Everything started to look suspicious, so the chief's guard went up. Director Jae-gyu popped a square cinnamon candy in his mouth and offered one to the army chief. The chief secretly dropped the candy because he suspected that it was poisoned. Despite his suspicions, the army chief did not outright blame or oppose Jae-gyu. Instead, he made the intelligence director think that the coup was around the corner. And that changed everything. Instead of going to the KCIA headquarters, where he would be the one calling the shots, Jae-gyu ordered the car to be taken to the army headquarters, where the army chief would be in command. Jae-gyu did this under the assumption that the army chief was on his side. Shortly after the duo reached the army headquarters, uniformed men surrounded Director Jae-gyu and took him into custody. Had Jae-gyu gone to the KCIA headquarters, things would have been different. Had he gotten the army chief on his side, things would have been different. But things were the way they were. Jae-gyu was arrested and an investigation was launched into President Park's assassination.
There is a new government tonight in South Korea. Park Chung-hee, who ruled the country for more than 18 years, is dead. The new government announced...
Now, unlike most murder mysteries, this one isn't about who did it. That was clear from Jae-gyu's bloodstained clothes and his weapon. The big mystery was why Jae-gyu would kill his close friend. And that is what most of the initial investigation revolved around. Strangely enough, none of the conspirators knew why Jae-gyu killed Park either. They just, followed his orders because he was their superior, or who knows, maybe they also hated the president. Chief Secretary Kim was also charged as a co-conspirator because he didn't immediately disclose Jae-gyu's involvement in the murder. It seems like he became an accessory after the fact. The ladies who were driven to a separate location by the KCIA and even paid to remain quiet ended up speaking to the authorities. They were not viewed as suspects and their testimony was pretty helpful to the state. One of them went on to write a book, which is a primary source for most of what we know about what happened in the banquet hall that night. Another source is Jae-gyu's own reenactment, which was televised. The former KCIA director was taken to the banquet hall where he showed the prosecutors how he killed the president. And with that, the who and the how of the crime became clear. But the why remained a mystery. During his trial, Jae-gyu gave several reasons for killing the president, but it seemed like he was rationalizing the murder after it had taken place. His true motive remained vague until the very end. The first to be executed was Jae-gyu's secretary, Park Hyung-ju, who faced a firing squad. He was executed before anyone else because he was in active military service when he got involved in the president's assassination. Then, Jae-gyu was hanged to death alongside 4 of his key conspirators. His student Seon-ho was among those hanged. The men Seon-ho recruited were also hanged. Chief Secretary Kim, the 4th man in the room, was seen as complicit for his initial silence, so he too was sentenced to death. But later, his sentence was commuted to life in prison, and he was released in 1982. Dozens of KCIA agents were involved in transporting the body, securing the safe house, and shooting non-KCIA guards, but they were simply following orders without knowing what was going on. Only Jae-gyu's student Seon-ho and his secretary Hyung-ju knew about the conspiracy, and with their execution, died any chance of getting a definitive answer as to why Jae-gyu killed President Park. Now, the strange assassination of the Korean president might not be so strange after all. In fact, there are too many theories that explain why Park Chung-hee was killed, and the problem is, all of them sound very plausible. Let's start with the simplest one. The killing was an impulsive act and wasn't planned beforehand. You see, director Jae-gyu was under a lot of pressure as South Korea was on the brink of civil war. At the same time, bodyguard Cha was encroaching on KCIA's turn and becoming President Park's favorite in the process. During the fateful dinner, Park and his bodyguard ganged up on the KCIA director, even berating him for his incompetence. This could have been the final straw because director Jae-gyu left the hall soon after, returning only once he had the gun. Either Jae-gyu got mad at being berated or he got jealous of bodyguard Cha's position in President Park's inner circle, but both of these reasons could explain the killing as an impulsive act, is my point. Remember that initially Jae-gyu aimed at Park while asking Secretary Kim to take good care of the president. The biggest point in favor of this theory is that Jae-gyu got his buddies on board minutes before actually killing the president, so it does seem like the decision was made during the dinner. His former student and last-minute co-conspirator Seon-ho even expressed regret over not having enough information beforehand to do a better job of handling the aftermath. Add to that the fact that Jae-gyu went to the Army HQ instead of KCIA HQ, and it starts to look like he really was a man without a plan. That said, he could have been betrayed by the army chief. Maybe he didn't have the gun with him from the get-go to prevent bodyguard Cha from getting suspicious early on. Above all, he had arranged for the army chief and the KCIA deputy to be in the neighboring building, which is a strange coincidence. But it wouldn't be a coincidence at all if the second theory is true, that the killing was deliberate and premeditated. Even if we set aside the fact that Jae-gyu invited the army chief to the KCIA compound, we still have Jae-gyu's own admission that he had tried to assassinate Park 3 times. His motive, according to his last statement, was to restore free democracy and prevent further bloodshed. That can be seen as posturing after a failed coup. That brings us to the third theory, that the CIA was behind the assassination. In his final statement, Jae-gyu said that one of his motives was to restore South Korea's relationship with the US, which was at an all-time low as President Park was trying to develop nukes. Jae-gyu had frequent meetings with the CIA chief in Seoul. He met with the American ambassador on the day of the assassination, roughly 5 hours before the shooting. In light of these facts, my personal theory is that Jae-gyu wanted a mini-coup not against Park, but against bodyguard Cha. That'd explain the army chief's presence. Perhaps the plan was to eliminate Cha's men and even Cha himself. With bodyguard Cha's parallel police neutralized, Park could be strong-armed into resigning, or at least retreating on certain points. It seems like Jae-gyu had something planned. The fact that the army chief and the deputy director of his intelligence agency were there makes this very clear to me. It is also clear that Jae-gyu didn't have a good enough plan for what happened afterward. So, to me, It seems like whatever Jae-gyu had planned did not involve Park's death. And that part could have been impulsive. Seeing Park, his former classmate and friend, jump to Cha's defense made him change his mind in the heat of the moment. And like a scorned lover, he killed the president. But hey, that's just my theory. What do you think happened? Let me know in the comments below.